Joining me now is a former New England Patriots wide receiver and Super Bowl 51 champion. Nonetheless, in 2016, he founded the Share the Magic Foundation, whose sole purpose is to transform children's lives through literacy, and since retirement has published a variety of children's books. On behalf of myself and Brandeis University, Malcolm Mitchell, thank you for joining the program this afternoon.
No, thank you for having me, man. I'm happy to talk with you.
As I talk about your foundation, I believe many of our listeners are unfamiliar with its origins. What inspired you to establish the Share the Magic Foundation and create your youth literacy initiative, Read with Malcolm?
Yeah, I created Share the Magic Foundation in 2016. My goal was to impact the lives of children through literacy. Growing up in Valdosta, Georgia, I did the most natural thing kids in my environment did. I neglected school and focused on sport. And while football had this incredible impact on my life, I realized if I gave my brain the same amount of attention I was giving my body as an athlete, it would result in the same outcome. And that's just progression and advancement, financial freedom, social mobility. So I started reading on the basis of bettering myself as a human being, broadening my perception, perspective, developing empathy that's needed to function and socialize with other individuals. And once I went through this transformation for myself, I reflected on my community and realized that just like me, millions of other kids don't understand the importance of reading because sometimes it's not delivered in the most culturally relevant way. So I wanted to be someone who said, wait, athletics and entertainment is not the only way. That I myself grew up just like you, and I'm trying to tell you that reading is the most impactful and empowering activity you can participate in. And through reading, you can make your dreams come true. So that's why I started Share the Magic Foundation. I wanted to encourage children to understand the importance of reading, and I started writing books to give them material that did the same.
Coming out of high school, you were a four-star recruit with offers from the University of Alabama, Clemson, and Auburn. And I know actually that Kirby Smart recruited you from Alabama, ironically.
Yeah.
What drew you to play college football, however, at the University of Georgia?
Camaraderie. Ironically, I don't watch a lot of sports. I was a very active kid, played outside all the time, and I was really into the arts. So this was just camaraderie. When I went to campus, everyone made me feel welcome, made me feel like I was at home, made me feel like that was the environment that would best support me away from my mother and my siblings. And that's why I decided to go to the University of Georgia.
Playing for 4 years and graduating with a communications degree in 2015, what did you learn about yourself during your collegiate career that carries to how you live your life today?
I learned resilience. While I was in college, I went through a plethora of injuries. I maybe had anywhere from 5 to 6, maybe even 7 surgeries that I thought would derail my athletic career, but somehow through faith and encouragement, I was able to prevail. And I kind of learned that life was a lot different than I expected it to be as a child, that challenges are inevitable, but through perseverance and belief in yourself and the continuous process of trying to learn and grow and challenge what you perceive to be true, I kind of understood that my life on earth was boundless. It was only limited to what I allowed myself to believe. So while I was in college, I went through this gigantic transformation. My core values are still in line to the principles my mother taught me as a child, but the way I go about understanding or acquiring information or challenging the information that is perceived to be true, all of that came while I was at the University of Georgia. It came through adversity. It came through exposure.
Do you find this to be on the
Yeah.
football field or also in the classroom or a combination?
I don't think it was either. I don't think it was football or the classroom. I just think it was day-to-day life, going to the grocery store, joining book clubs. Um, football never really, football has its intangibles. Being in the classroom has its intangibles, but most of that was routine. You go to school when you're what, like 4 or 5 years old. So it becomes routine, habit. Unfortunately for me, I never found importance in that routine or habit. Football became routine and habit. I started in fourth grade. So by the time I got to college, it was almost muscle memory to do both football and school. What was not muscle memory was leisurely reading or leisure reading. I'm not even sure leisurely is a word, but
Looking back, what role do you believe reading and literacy had in your abilities to understand football plays and schemes? Or do you find that football and reading and writing go separate?
no, reading is attached to everything. It is attached to everything because it is the only way to really fuel and power your brain. We work off of neural connectivity, neural pathways. So being an athlete, having the ability to process and apply information at rapid speed is extremely important, right? Some of it is innate in muscle memory off of having so much experience doing it. But on the football field, there are plenty of times where new situations arise, or you have to take information from the coaches or the locker room or the meetings and apply it in real time at rapid speed. Your brain is the most important piece of all of that. Working out and training is okay, and it has its importance too, because if your brain can think it, but if your body can't do it, it won't work. So having those two aligned is important. And reading is vital to anything you do in life.
After speaking with teachers, parents, and education personnel, what changes and policies do you believe need to be implemented to address childhood illiteracy in the United States?
That's a great question. I would say reading needs to be emphasized not only from K to fifth grade or somewhat in middle school. I remember having 30-minute reading sessions at the beginning of the day, but an entire curriculum needs to be built around the scope of reading from the time you enter school to the time you leave. Because just as anything else in life, there are levels to which we can read. And until you really get to a deep reading process where you're taking the information, being completely absorbed in the process, or the articulated thoughts of a character, you can't really grasp the full benefits of being a reader. And that's being expanded through empathy and the perception of whatever information you're consuming. I'm not sure that's achievable for kids in low-income communities who start off so far behind from K to fifth grade. I think it needs to be extended well beyond that, and reading needs to be a part of the curriculum further than elementary and middle school. I'm trying to remember my time in high school, and by the time I was 11th grade, reading was something that was expected versus something that was still being taught or focused upon. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I don't know about you, but I'm kind of noticing more as a college student that there are discrepancies, that there are differences in the state, local, national levels of how education is emphasized and the funding and what is more important compared to others.
Right. To me, reading is the focal point for everything. It's impossible. I call reading the trifecta. Here's why I call it a trifecta, because if you can't read, you're more likely to be incarcerated. If you're not literate, let's use literate and so we can stay on a professional level. If your literacy rate is really low, you're more likely to be incarcerated. You're more likely to drop out of school. You're more likely to need government assistance. you're more likely not to have financial stability. Reading is the foundation for being productive in this society. To be productive in America, you have to be reading at a certain level so you can acquire information, apply it, and make the best possible choices. If you can't do that, well, then you're left with all those high rate percentages that I just listed out. It's if you're illiterate, you're going to fall into one of those brackets at some point.
Do you believe this pandemic period of quarantining and staying at home has allowed children to discover new reads, or rather, has it inhibited their abilities to learn in an appropriate environment?
Both. I think for a child who was reading or has an environment where reading is if a child had already become a reader or fell in love with the process of reading before the pandemic, I have reason to believe that continued. For a child who may not have, I really don't have a reason to assume that was picked up or acquired. School was the place for that opportunity to exist. Not going to school doesn't magically make that opportunity exist in a home where it wasn't relevant in the first place. So the answer to that question is both. Those who are reading, I hope, continue to read or even increase their the amount in which they're reading. Those who were not reading, I'm sure continue not to read.
Last year in an interview with Tamron Hall, you said that your first book, The Magician's Hat, meant more than your Super Bowl ring. I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Yeah, the Super Bowl was one of the most memorable moments of my life, man. It's just, I'm not sure I could do something that measures up to that in the eyes of society, if that makes sense. But for me, that was very self-gratifying. Yes, my name will be attached to a Super Bowl well beyond my life on earth. But that didn't help anyone immediately. I guess you can say me being a Super Bowl champion gives me access to children that allows me to encourage them. And I love that idea. But writing was something that I just felt was more beneficial to children, to people, to individuals trying to find growth or belief in themselves. So that's why I consider writing the picture books to be a little more important to me, because I think it does a better job of sending the message that you can do it. And that's what it means to me.
With the NFL draft happening next week, I have to ask a few football questions.
Yeah, of course.
When you look at the New England Patriots roster now and the offseason moves they made, what player or position do you believe the team could target with the 15th overall pick?
Well, I'm extremely sad that Julian's retiring. Him and I were able to stay good friends over time. And a lot of the guys that are still on the team, I grew really fond of. Matthew Slater, the McCourty twins. All of them are just great guys and really have become part of my family. In relation to the draft, honestly, I don't know. I don't watch football that often. I watch the Patriots games and I watch the Falcons games, but in terms of who they should pick, I have no clue. I don't know if they re-signed Cam or not.
They did to a one-year deal worth $10 million.
Oh, good for Cam. Yeah, that's great for him. I watched some interviews with him. Saw him trying to reestablish himself. So that's great, showing some confidence in him. But I don't know. Well, since Julian retired, I would assume a tight end and receiver should be priority number one. Mm-hmm. Cam needs someone around him to make plays. The offensive line, I think all the guys that I played with are still there.
Tooney left for Kansas City.
Tooney left. Okay, I came in with Tooney. So good for him. Did he get a big deal with them?
Yes, he signed a 5-year deal with Kansas City.
Great for him, man.
You think that maybe it's kind of where, similar to last year's draft, where you can address multiple position groups?
Well, I think the Patriots have to do so. When Tom left, the rebuilding process immediately needed to start. Unfortunately, I think New England fans, including myself, had these high expectations that the train would continue to roll down the same track, but that's just not realistic. So I think there are a lot of gaps, definitely offensively, that need to be filled.
As you talk about, at the beginning of that question there, your answer, you talked about Julian Edelman. What impact did he have on you during your rookie season?
Oh, great friend. Man, he's so encouraging. He's a gladiator. He's a warrior. There's a clip where we're on the sideline and he's just telling me about the message that his dad told him as a kid. And I'm like, that was the code in which I lived by too. So, man, we were just in sync. We were just always, I think what made us really close, we realized in each other that we were willing to sacrifice and do whatever it took to get the job done. When game day came about, we trusted each other, counted on each other. And even though I was a rookie, he had very high expectations for me. And as a veteran, I wanted to do my part to make everyone proud, but especially the receiver group.
From the first few weeks of that 2016 season, I recognized that everything seemed to be meshing together well on the field and the level of intensity remained high. Was there a period during the season where the game began to slow down and everything clicked?
Yes, it was when we played the Rams in 2016. I forget which month and I forget which game, but it was a 1 o'clock game. I know that much. I was never a fan of 1 o'clock games, but I ate some espresso coffee beans or something to get jacked up. Smelled some of that smelling salt, man. I was wired. But during the game, it was so slow. I remember being hungry, and I had never thought about food during a game before. Not that it was boring or anything like that. I had a great game. I had like 7 or 8 receptions. But the game just slowed down, and I really enjoyed it. I was able to appreciate being on the field, appreciate the stands, and appreciate the environment, appreciate my relationship with the quarterback, the receivers, the defense. And I wasn't just spinning in circles trying to keep up, but I felt very at ease on the field.
From an Under Armour All-American high school star to a starting receiver at Georgia to an NFL wide receiver, was there a player you tried to emulate?
No, I was a huge fan, or I still am a huge fan of Randy Moss. That's the only person I watched as a kid. And that's it, man. I was watching like Tom and Jerry and stuff like that. Randy Moss was just, he used to always play outside, and we had a neighborhood game called Moss. You throw the ball up, 5 people will be in a circle, jump up and catch it. Whoever catches it, Moss is everyone else. So Randy Moss became like a neighborhood legend, I'm sure, for me and many other kids. So he's who I watch all the time.
A number of Brandeis students are interested in pursuing a career involving education policy. What advice do you have for them if they choose to take that path?
I would say find your truth and continue to challenge it. I think the world has a way of introducing a lot of concepts that seem relevant, but at its core, there's very few things that really impact the bottom line. And for me, those 2 things are budget and budget restrictions, finances available to actually make the change, because in our society, nothing can happen without money. And then in terms of education, what really impacts the bottom line? Are we trying to get kids who are already succeeding to succeed even more? Or are we trying to help the kids who are struggling most catch up so they too can have the opportunity to participate in the IB programs, the AP programs, the STEM programs? What are we really trying to accomplish? Identify that, and there's no right or wrong answer. Identify what you really want to accomplish. Do you want to help those who already are being helped? Or do you want to help those who are struggling and don't fully understand the resources that can be provided or that need financial assistance to acquire them. Identify that, and that will be your truth, and continue to challenge it because it'll change as you acquire more information.
On Tuesday afternoon, Derek Chauvin was convicted by a Minnesota jury of 1 count of second-degree unintentional murder, 1 count of third-degree murder, and 1 count of second-degree manslaughter after kneeling on the neck of George Floyd last May. What is your reaction to the verdict?
That's a great question. And I watched the trial, and I watched the attorneys deliver their message after the trial. And as an African-American male, we can assume that I had some emotional response to the incident taking place, some emotional investment in watching the trial, and also some emotional reaction to the verdict. At the end of the day, for me, it's not really defining as a person and not God. It's not defining who's bad and who's good. For me, it's not defining who's right and who's wrong. For me, it's continuing to try to challenge my perception and the perception of those around me to truly understand everybody and the way that they think. So when the verdict was released, I saw it from both spectrums. I saw this family who has been through so much, who has been affected by the death of their loved one, rejoice and be happy that they have closure. They're not rewarded their family member back, but they have closure that that they feel the right thing was done. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have a father who will no longer be around his family. Is he deserving of that? I can't make that claim. I'm not God. I don't know what he deserves. But the information is all I have. And the information is there are laws in place that say you can and you can't do certain things. If you break that law, well, there are consequences, and everyone has to live by those consequences. That's all I have. It's not appropriate for me to judge anyone. Here's a man who died, who's been taken away from his family. Here's a man who committed a crime, who is now taken away from his family. Which one is right? Which one is wrong? It's not for me to decide.
Malcolm, thank you for joining the program this afternoon. For those interested in learning more about your foundation, such as donating or getting involved, where can they go for more information?
Please go to Share the Magic. Go to readwithmalcolm.com, to learn more about what I am doing and hopefully support. Go to readwithmalcolm.com.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, man.